Union City is located in Hudson County, New Jersey. Because of its close proximity to Manhattan, it has attracted many different waves of migrants to the city, beginning with Germans in the late 1800s, to Irish and Italians in the 1890s to 1970s, to Cubans in the 1940s to 1980s, to Dominicans in 2010. Union City has a deep history of migration that can be seen in its infrastructure and community life. Currently, Union City is made up of 84.7% Latinx populations. Dominicans, Cubans, Puerto Ricans, Mexicans, Ecuadorians, Salvadorians, Colombians, Peruvians, and Hondurans all make up the largest communities in Union City today. It is also the second densest city per square mile in the United States. By taking a deeper look into the Latinx migration into Union City, we can catch a glimpse of the Latinx immigrant experience in New Jersey. The history of Union City also reveals how populations shifted and grew over time to become the ethnic enclave that it is today. Before the population growth of Latinx communities in Union City, the area served as an enclave for German immigrants hoping to escape the crowded living conditions of New York, and they found that Union City, with its booming textile industry, provided a good place to move to. Union City became the capital of the United States embroidery industry in 1872 with the introduction of the first embroidery machine. During this time, urbanization transformed the city and new immigrants began to move into the area. Irish and Italian immigrants arrived in the 1890s to work on industrial projects like the new trolley system and the development of Bergen Line Avenue in 1930. Cubans migrated to Union City in the 1940s after word spread of its booming embroidery industry. Many of the Cuban migrants came from small towns in central Cuba, especially from the town of Villa Clara province. During the 1940s to 1960s, several Cuban musicians migrated to the Hudson area to be a part of the bustling Cuban jazz scene. Additionally, the popularity of baseball led to the migration of Cuban baseball players to the Hudson area. These early migrations created Cuban communities prior to the three waves of post-Castro migration that would occur a little later. Some Cuban immigrants still retained involvement with political activities back home. During the Batista regime, many Cuban immigrants in the United States, including Union City, participated in the 26th of July movement, which ultimately placed Castro into power. One such revolutionary by the name of Silverio Rodriguez recalls meeting Fidel Castro in a bodega on 26th and Bergen Line. After Fidel Castro overthrew the military dictatorship of Fulgencio Batista in 1959, the first large wave of Cuban immigration occurred in the United States. Union City also had its first wave of Cuban immigrants in large numbers who were drawn to the city because of relatives which had previously moved to Union City in the 1940s. Government-sponsored programs like Operation Peter Pan, which took unaccompanied minors to the U.S. from Cuba in 1960 to 1962. Some children lived with relatives while others lived in government-run camps. Because of programs like this, Union City had the second largest Cuban population in the 1960s, just after Miami, and was even nicknamed Havana on the Hudson. Among these Cuban immigrants, many during this time were from far more affluent backgrounds or worked with the Batista government. The story of Danfa Guerrero's family migration from Cuba to Union City reflects this trend. Danfa Guerrero arrived with his parents to Union City during the second wave of Cuban migration when they fled from the Castro regime. The Figueredo's cousins already moved to Union City in the first wave of migration and was able to set up an apartment for them when they arrived. Despite having family connections to the area, adjusting to life in the United States was difficult. Listen to Dan describe the difficulty in adjusting to living in Union City.
When I got to Union City, I didn't know anyone. and I felt so dislocated and misplaced. My parents immediately connected with a very active Cuban community at that time. This is 1966. Today it will be a Latino community because Union City is so much more diverse and it makes it a better city. But at that time it was basically Italian, Polish, Irish, and Cubans.
In 1974, President Lyndon B. Johnson sponsored a resettlement program for Cubans, which flew Cubans from Cuba to Miami. After they landed, the Cuban refugee program resettled these Cuban immigrants to California, New York, and New Jersey, creating the second wave of Cuban migrants into Union City. The third wave of Cuban migrants came in 1980 when the United States used the Mariel boat lift to emigrate more Cubans from the Mariel Harbor to the United States, resulting in 10,000 Cuban migrants to settle in Union City. The third wave of migrants tended to be less affluent and darker skinned. Gradually, more Latinx communities began to move into Union City. In 1990, Puerto Ricans made up the second largest group with 13.5% of the population. Cubans were still the majority at 25.4% of the city's population. In 2000, Cubans still remained the majority with 15.4%. The Puerto Rican community declined to 11%, and Dominicans jumped from 9.1% in 1990 to 11.5% in 2000. Additionally, the Mexican community jumped from 1.3% in 1990 to 4.1% in 2000. In 2010, Cubans lost the lead as the largest Latinx community in Union City, making up 11.3% of the population. The Dominican population became the largest Latinx group in Union City, making up 15.1% of the city's population. In 2010, Puerto Ricans still made up 10%, Ecuadorians now made up 9.2%, Mexicans increased to 7.8%, Salvadorians made up 7.6%, Colombians made up 4.9%, Peruvians made up 4.7%, and Hondurans made up 3.8% of Union City. It is clear that in 2010, the Latinx community in Union City diversified, and for the first time, Cubans no longer made up the majority of the city's Latinx population. Since 2000, Dominicans were the fastest growing population in Union City. In part, this is because in 1990, immigration from Mexico declined in the United States, which allowed more backlogged applicants from places like the Dominican Republic to go through immigration process. Listen as Griselda Hernandez speaks about Union City when she arrived here from the Dominican Republic and how it's changed in her time.
Porque siempre Union City ha sido una ciudad residencial para familias. Lo que ha ido con lo que lo han ido avanzando. Según cuando yo llegué, yo creo que no me acuerdo cómo se llamaba el mayor de aquí de Union City, pero cuando llegó entonces Brian Stack había ido reformando poco a poco y se ha ido poniendo mejor. Antes había vandalismo, que ahora, o sea, cosas donde sitios, donde vendían cosas, drogas, cosas así, y se fue arreglando, peleamos mucho, que a veces en la esquina de la 9, ahí se hacía, en la 9 Union City, siempre la gente lo tenía como un sitio malo y ya no. Y mira, ahí ya tiene Brian Stack a un puesto, o sea que la ciudad ha ido mejorando mucho y se ha puesto que es bien residencial. Ya para tú estar viviendo aquí, ¿sabes? Ni aparecen los apartamentos, por eso mismo, porque es un lugar muy bueno para criar la familia.
Brian Stack is the mayor of Union City and has been since 2000. He's very popular among the Latinx community within Union City. If you were to walk around Union City, you would see signs all year long in people's windows that promote Brian Stack. I grew up in Union City, and every year I remember turkeys being distributed to every single door of the community for Thanksgiving from Brian Stack's office. Actions like this, along with many other programs, made him extremely popular among the community. Although Mrs. Hernandez enjoys living in Union City and favors Brian Stack, the city's investment in real estate development is creating conditions that are making it difficult for her to stay. What's happening to Mrs. Hernandez is not an isolated incident, but part of a larger gentrification process in Union City. Brian Stack, although he does a lot for the Latinx community in Union City, has also made his career by promoting the real estate development of the city. New developments and condos can be seen everywhere. The New York Times promoted Union City as an affordable place to live for those who want easy access to Manhattan and views of the Hudson River. With the recent redevelopment of Union City and the increased rent and land value, it is hard to say what will happen to the Latinx populations within the next 10 years. Union City has always been a working class city for various immigrant groups, but only time will tell what effects gentrification will have on the diverse Latinx enclave with a rich history.